to all of you. Today is the appearance day of Bhagavad Gita, and before we get into Bhagavatam class, the topic for today, the verse for today, then we will speak a little about that. And I think some of you may be here for Bhakta Rupa's 1 year disappearance anniversary, his Tirubhav. So if you don't know, we'll speak about that a little bit more. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribharadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribharadhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjanaya Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Haribol. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki, Shri Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Hari ki, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is ki, Shri Gita, Bhagavad Gita Jayanti ki, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much to temple management, especially Rukmini Mataji, who arranges this roster and giving us a chance to render some service for our own purification. So very appreciative. Thank you. So today is the Divine Appearance Day of Bhagavad Gita, spoken 5,000 years ago, we say approximately. Somebody was reading, somebody said 5,174 years ago. So very precise. And let's just hear about Bhagavad Gita. We know that the entire Mahabharata was engineered by Lord Krishna so that Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. The Supreme Lord's plan is in the background. It's the invisible canvas against which Bhagavad Gita is painted, because Mother Bhumi went to Lord Brahma crying for help, that the planet has become overburdened by the force of demoniac kings. And therefore, one of the reasons for Krishna coming is that he comes to vanquish and annihilate all of these demons, to relieve the earth of her burden. Earth is Bhumi, she's a devotee. And so Krishna comes, and in Bhagavad Gita he predicts that whenever and wherever there's decline in religion, I manifest myself. And he gives the reasons why he comes. Paritranaya sadhunam, to protect the devotees. Vinashaya cha duskritam, annihilate the miscreants. And third one, Surabhi, you saying? To re-establish dharma, dharma samstarpanartaya, sambhavami, yuge yuge, I come millennium after millennium. So how does he do that? He annihilates the demons, so he gets rid of them. Those are causing the disturbance. And then he gives the transcendental knowledge by which we can re-establish the principles of religion. And Arjuna becomes his agent by which he presents this knowledge. So Arjuna also represents the dilemma of all of us to come in the future, right? And now we're studying Bhagavad Gita and seeing how relevant Bhagavad Gita is to us. We should not misinterpret and think that Arjuna is a metaphorical figure and we are, representing us. No. That is a Mayavadi idea, They say the Pandavas, Kurukshetra, none of these ever existed. They're actually just figments of imagination. They're metaphors for the body, and the Pandavas are the five senses. All of this, we hear this, but then you can just say, well, Kurukshetra is a historical place. You can go there and visit it. So what's metaphorical about it? You can go there. Archaeologists have found weapons there. Big temple established there. So many things, right? So for devotees, we dismiss that. We don't accept that idea. So Krishna speaks, and if we'll just read something to commemorate Gita Jayanti, we should read from Bhagavad Gita, at least something. And some devotees are holding the Gita Yagya, where they'll recite the whole Bhagavad Gita, and sometimes even perform a fire yagya with that. But at least they will read. Gita Yagya can also mean not just fire yagya, but the sacrifice of Bhagavad Gita, of reading Bhagavad Gita. And if you're not too hungry, maybe we can do for the next 3 hours. What do you think? Okay, just kidding. But it would be wonderful if we could just recite the whole Bhagavad Gita today. So chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, say loudly. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, Divya Gyan. The first verse, what I'll do is I'll read the Sanskrit, the three verses Sanskrit, and then the English one after the other, right? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivashvate Yogam Proktavam Aham Avyayam Vivashvan Manava Praha Manur Ikshvakave Bravit Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajasayo Vidu Sakalena Mata Yoga Nasta Parantapa Sa Evayam Maya Tedya Yoga Prokta Purantana Bhaktosmi Bhaktosi Meshaka Cheti Rahasyam Hi Yetad Uttamam. The translation, verse text 1, 2 and 3 in sequence. The personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in the course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. So Srila Prabhupada, Krishna is explaining what is the quality of one to receive this transcendental knowledge. And Krishna is explaining the history in the first verse, how he spoke it to Vivasvan, and Vivasvan spoke it to Manu. And it is coming down in a disciplic succession. But in the course of time, that disciplic succession was lost. As is the nature of this material world, everything fades into oblivion, civilizations crumble, knowledge gets lost, people forget, so many things. So Krishna comes from time to time to re-establish that. So Gita Jayanti is that Jayanti, the appearance, the birth, the appearance of Gita today, as Krishna spoke this knowledge to Arjuna. And we are by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have the bona fide version. As Krishna says, the supreme science was thus received by the chain of disciplic succession. And we've got that. In one of his lectures, Srila Prabhupada says that he is explaining why Bhagavad Gita as it is. And he explains that there, that there's nothing been adulterated, and therefore the message from Krishna is coming intact through the disciplic succession. And he makes a very strong point in that lecture, which I use in my Bhagavad Gita seminars. He says that the devotee of Krishna can understand Krishna. Just like a family member, if you want to know about the father, you ask the children, they will tell you about the family member, the father. Nobody outside the family can tell you anything. Therefore, it is those who are devotees of Krishna can speak about Krishna. And then he makes a point. He says, actually, nobody but the devotee has a right to speak about Krishna. This is how powerful and emphatic Srila Prabhupada is. Therefore, Krishna speaks to Arjuna, and this divine sublime knowledge has been established. Krishna appeared. Some very specific details are given by some calculations. He appeared in July 3228 BCE. Left the planet at 3102 BCE in February. Dates are given 16th, 17th, around there. The beginning of Kali Yuga, 17th February 3102 BCE. And Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita 35 or 36 years before that. And therefore that would have made him 89 years when he spoke Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna lives for 125 years as an eternal 16-year-old youth. So that 89, where we are double bent over with age, it certainly doesn't affect Krishna at all. He's ever youthful. Nava yovanamcha. It's always eternally youthful. So Krishna speaks that science. And it is in the Mahabharata, the beginning of the Mahabharata, where Arjuna is bewildered about his duty. And Krishna speaks this knowledge to convince Arjuna of his duty, as well as to establish the 5 truths: Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, Karma, and the existential position of the soul, as well as re-establish the principles of religion. These are the things Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita. And it happened today, 5,000 years ago, approximately. So we should take this day as very, very auspicious. It's a great day because our whole lives revolve around Bhagavad Gita. When we start learning, we are reading the simple books, the Srila Prabhupada's smaller books. They are giving us the knowledge from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita in a condensed way. And then we start entering into Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is spoken and then to convince us of Krishna's divinity. After hearing Bhagavad Gita, and particularly in the beginning, Krishna does not speak about his credentials until Arjuna starts to surrender. Then Krishna gives his credentials, who he is. And when we are convinced about Krishna being the Supreme Lord, then we can enter into the other scriptures, because now we know that Krishna's divinity and his activities and his incredulous activities described in these books, we can accept it because we know Krishna is the Supreme Lord. We have to have that firm grounding. Those who may still be on the periphery of this knowledge, impacted by so many other understandings in a community, all is not one. This name of this Deva, that Deva, they are jivas, they are spirit souls. They are not Krishna. They are not forms of Krishna. We have to be convinced. Ete chamsa kala pumsa Krishna astu Bhagavan swayam. That these are, there may be Krishna's expansions and expansions of expansions, portions and portions, plenary portions and portions of plenary portions. But Krishna is the Swayam Bhagavan, the one who is in the spiritual world playing his flute. Venan kananta maravinda dalaya taksham bahar vatamsham ashitam buddha sundaram. with his beautiful lotus-like eyes, playing his flute. So Krishna, that personality, when you're convinced of him, then to get to know Krishna is to love him. And if you say, I love Krishna, then it's to get to know him. You can't just say, I love Krishna. Get to know him by reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And when you get to know Krishna, then you love him. Right? So more and more. So today is Gita Jayanti, and we would encourage you to please take up Bhagavad Gita today. Read. At least choose one chapter. At least one chapter. Bhagavad Gita. Maybe since we started Transcendental Knowledge, you can do that. It don't take long. For one chapter, maybe if you're slow readers, maybe half an hour, you can go through it. How long does it take you, Surabhi, for like one chapter? Yeah, it depends whether you're like digging deep in the purport or just quick. Yeah? Maybe half an hour, 40 minutes you can. With the purport. Little longer? Yeah, a little longer. So read one chapter today. And since we are in the book marathon, today is a very, very important day in which you can ask people. Every year we used to have the online Gita, at least telethon. This year we didn't quite arrange it. But my task today is that I'm going to phone all my contacts. And I'm going to ask them to sponsor one Bhagavad Gita. Right? Minimum. So you must bless me. I'm going to try that. And I don't want to run out of data or anything, but I think we can manage it. So we'll try and do that. So what about you? Like everybody here in the temple today, how about you? If you have some spare Lakshmi, why don't you just take one Bhagavad Gita today? 100 Rand it is. And if you already have it, give it to somebody as a gift. Everybody's giving Christmas gifts this weekend. We don't know what to buy for people. We give them one. Something from China in 3 weeks' time, it's broken. Something. Give them one Bhagavad Gita, Eternal Knowledge. Take one. Even if you've been distributing. I know there's a lot of book distributors here in this audience. And you're doing powerful book distributing. But others, take one Bhagavad Gita. And say that on Gita Jayanti, I distributed one Bhagavad Gita, minimum, and get the blessings of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Right? Why? Because Krishna says that one who distributes or spreads my glories is pleasing to me. So by giving the Bhagavad Gita, you are distributing the glories of Krishna. Do that, even if you got no Lakshmi. Phone one child of yours, one son, one daughter, one niece. Say, Beta, I'm distributing Bhagavad Gita today. And I'm in the temple. I heard I want to give this Bhagavad Gita. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki. Shri Giri Govardhan ki. Shri Shinitai Gaura Hari ki. Gita Jayanti ki jai. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. So we want to be able to please do that. Phone somebody. Those who are online, who are listening, or who will listen, sometimes later they get onto the class. Please do that today. Phone somebody. It's so easy. Just pick up the phone. Even do some cold calling. Just call just randomly, just call somebody. And say, I'm calling from the Hare Krishna temple. Right? Be proud to say that. I'm calling from the Hare Krishna temple. And today is Gita Jayanti. The auspicious appearance of Bhagavad Gita. And we'd like to offer you the opportunity to receive the blessings of the Lord by taking one Bhagavad Gita, please. And if you are interested, I'll send you the bank details. And then you can also, for the reference, you can say, put your name and put my initials, like your initials there. So they can track it, who did the Sankirtan. So I'll put SKD, right? Somebody else put their name. So just put your initial, they'll track it. They'll know, okay, you did 100 Bhagavad Gitas today. Wow, amazing. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswati vyasam tato jaye udiyare. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nittam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti bhavate naistake. Om jnana timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya. Chakshurun militam yena tasmai shri guruve namah. He Krishna karuna sindhu dina bandhu jagatpate. Gopisha gopika kanta radha kanta namostute. Tapta kanchana gourangi radhe vrindavaneshwari. Vrishabhanu sutta devi pranamami hari priye. Everybody, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Together, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim. Yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14, Text 12. It's a long verse. Normally we repeat, are we giving out that? Okay. So just find text 12. So the system in Srimad Bhagavatam class is that we read the verse, we do the word for word, then we read the verse in phases, in phrases, and we try to follow. Okay. Try not to put Bhagavatam on the floor. Text 12. Tadvidhavabhirasadvrito venusmabhikrito nipa santvito yadino vacham na grihashyati adharmakrit lokadikara sandagdham dhaishyama swatejasa. Okay, so let me do the verse with you and then we'll go to the word for it. Please repeat. Tad vidvabhira sadvrito venusmabhikrito nipa santvito yadhino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit nagrahisyati adharmakrit. Say nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadikara sandagdham dhayishyamasva tejasa. Tadvidvad bhirashadvrito venusmabhikrito nipa santvito yadhino vacham na grihasyati adharmakrit nagrahasyati adharmakrit lokadikara sandagdam dhaisyama swatejasa. Tad vidvabhirashadvrito venusmabhikrito nipa santvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadhikara sandagam dahisyama swatejasa. Please don't put Bhagavatam on the floor. Please repeat. Anybody would like to try? Prabhus? Tad vidvabhirasadvrito venosmabhirvito nipa sandvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati yadharmakrit slokastikara sandagam dahishyama swatejasa. Thank you. Rashidara. Vidbhabhirasadvrito venusmabhikrito nipa santvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadhikara sandagam dahishyama swatejasa. Anybody else wants to try? Mataji's? Tad vidvabhirasadvrito venusmabhikrito nipaha santvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadhikara sandagam dahishyama swatejasa. Tad vidvabhirasadvrito venusmabhikrito nipaha santvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadhikara sandagam dahishyama swatejasa. Surabhi, we'll take the last one. Tad vidvabhirasadvrito venusmabhikrito nipaha santvito yadino vacham nagrahisyati adharmakrit lokadhikara sandagam dahishyama swatejasa. Tad, his mischievous nature. Please respond loudly. vidvad bhi, aware of, asat vritaha, impious, vena, asmabhi, by us, kritaha, was made, nripaha, king, santvitaha, in spite of being pacified, yadi, if, naha, our, vacham, words, na, not, grahisyati, he will accept, adharmakrit, the most mischievous, lokadhikkara, by public condemnation, sandagdham, burned, dahishyama, we shall burn, swatejasa, by our prowess. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The saintly sages continued thinking, of course we are completely aware of his mischievous nature, yet nevertheless we enthroned Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, he will be condemned by the public and we will join them. Thus by our prowess we shall burn him. Thus by our prowess we shall burn him to ashes. Purport. Saintly persons are not interested in political matters. Yet they are always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. Consequently, they sometimes have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. However, in Kali Yuga, saintly persons are not as powerful as they previously were. They used to be able to burn any sinful man to ashes by virtue of their spiritual prowess. Now saintly persons have no such power due to the influence of the age of Kali. Indeed, the Brahmanas do not even have the power to perform sacrifices in which animals are put into the fire to attain a new life. Under these circumstances, instead of actively taking part in politics, saintly persons should engage in chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the purport, Prabhupada doesn't write it in full, it just says Hare Krishna. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, by simply chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the general populace can derive all benefits without political implications. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pucharine Nirvishesha Sunnivari Paschatya Desha Taurine. So, to place the context, Canto 4 is actually describing the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu and Santa Rupa. And many generations unfold after them, because we're talking of the lifespan of millions of years. And Swayambhuva Manu had two children, two boys, two males, Uttanapad and Priyavrata, and he had three daughters. You remember? Akuti, Devahuti, Prashuti. So we're following the story through Uttanapad, coming down through Dhruva's pastimes, as you heard, and all the intrigues of his life. Right? And now we're following through Dhruva's line, coming eventually to the great-grandson, I think, Anga. And Anga was wanting to perform this Ashwamedha Yagya to establish his supremacy as the ruler. And he did all the oblations to the demigods, but they were not coming to accept it. And therefore he consulted the sages to actually find out what is happening. And the sages indicate to him that due to some sinful activity in a previous life, he could not get a son now. And a son is needed for the Ashwamedha Yagya. So Anga was advised by the sages that you should offer your austerities and prayers to Vishnu, which he did. And by that, out of the Yagya, out of the fire, the sacrificial fire, arose a divine being who produced this payasam, nectar, and which he gave to his wife, Sunita. I can remember the names in this lineage. And she took that and she became pregnant and gave birth to Vena, or Vena. I think it's Vena, a short E, King Vena. But Vena, he got that name because that name means tormentor. And therefore he was a very, very sinful person from young. Torment the Brahmins, torment the animals in the forests, and commit all sorts of hostilities and aggressions. And as he grew up then, King Anga found it very, very difficult to discipline him. And when Vena was of youth, then King Anga very despondently, and also it's explained with disgust, he resigned from his throne and went to the forest to perform his austerities. And when he did that, there's no king. And when there's no king, the sinful, the rogues and thieves, as they describe, become prominent, and they'll create anarchy in the kingdom, chaos and crime, which we can see today, because there's no powerful spiritual king or ruler to establish the rule of law. So the sages, the kingdoms have a council of sages. We could call them the Brahmanical council, who give advice. And you find that they decided that they have to have a king, so that the citizens will be controlled and ruled, and the crime and anarchy which they saw impending disaster would be subdued. So there's no other descendant but Vena. So they placed Vena on the throne. And it had its effect of subduing the criminals, because they all knew Vena was a very, very powerful, antagonistic, aggressive, degraded king. Set a thief to catch a thief. So practically that's what happened. They put him on the throne and subdued. But he was not a spiritual leader. He was atheistic. And therefore, in that rule, he created all sorts of sinful activities. And the sages are now thinking, we put him there, therefore we are accountable, and now we should do something about it as well. So in this verse, the saintly sages continued thinking, of course we are completely aware of his mischievous nature. Nowadays we use the word mischievous as like, okay, he's mischievous, maybe he's a boy that's just plays around, makes some naughty. But this word mischievous is referring to his terribly sinful activity, right? And this is mischievous nature. They're aware of his sinful activity. They're very, very aware. And therefore, yet nevertheless we enthroned you. We enthroned Vena. Why? Emergency situation. There's no other king. They put him on the throne. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, what is advice? That to reform. Give, as you see later on, and we don't want to take the discuss those verses. The other devotees who are going to do that class can do that. They will try to advise him, and Vena, being sinful, will not accept the advice. So, if we cannot persuade King Vena to accept advice, he will be condemned by the public. The public will condemn the ruler, and there is a principle, an ethical principle, that the public should not insult or condemn the king. The king is meant to be placed there, divinely ordained. In this case of Vena, we say, is an emergency king. But he'll be condemned the public. And what will happen? We will join him. Who's we? The sages. Because they put him there, they will be accomplices to that crime of putting him there. By association. Right? We know that. Sometimes we do something and doesn't work out. Then somebody will tell you, but you did that, you put him there, you did that. So we get blamed by the association as well. And people say, what kind of sages are these? They are unqualified. Therefore, by our prowess, now we have to understand that these sages are very, very powerful in these Vedic times, and they could do such things. By our prowess, we shall burn him to ashes. We could do with one or two of those sages nowadays in the way our countries are being run, right? You could just take care of it. Gone. So Vena is representing the atheistic ruler, and we see a parallel with that in this age. The atheistic rulers are exploiting the people. Atheistic rulers are full of greed. They are chosen by people hoping that this king or this ruler will serve them. But he becomes the biggest exploiter and enriches himself rather than being the ruler who will be the biggest servant. Enriches himself and commits and permits all sorts of sinful activities for the sake of retaining one's position as the king or the president or the ruler or whatever it might be. So Vena is engaged in so much of sinful activity, so the saintly persons are now thinking we shall have to replace him if he does not take our advice. So in the purport we see Prabhupada makes a point. Saintly persons are not generally interested in politics. Right? They're not generally. But here, they are always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. And by advising the king, they are expressing their love for both the king and for the people in general. Because the saintly persons can see and they understand how the masses of people are entangled in materialistic, sense gratificatory activities, and if they do not follow regulative principles and principles of religion, then they will remain entangled in this world, suffering the consequences of their sinful activity, which comes from ignorance. The consequence of ignorance is sin. And the consequence of sin is suffering. So the saintly persons do not want the us, the general populace, to suffer. So they consequently, sometimes they have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. It's rather unfortunate, we see, if we can draw some parallels in today's society in South Africa. During the apartheid days, which we grew up through, the churches were powerful, and they rejected and objected to the way the government had interpreted Christianity and used it as an oppressive tool for society, separating people on the basis of color, and claiming that that was a principle of religion. So during apartheid, but in the churches, they were powerful, they objected. You find so many of those activists were high-ranking officials of particular churches, and they used peaceful protest as a means to draw attention, and they made comments. And we know one of those who elected or became very prominent in our country was Bishop Desmond Tutu. But they were powerful and active. Now we see the government is engaged in so much of corruption, but very few voices are being heard from these powerful institutions. We don't know why. But these are parallels in society, right? We can see there. So governments were under the council in the ancient history, Vedic history. Governments were under the council of brahmanas, and they took advice, and they would then ensure that the populace, regarded as their children, were given all facilities. Under the rules of the Raja Rishis, there was no poverty and there was no distress. We speak of Ram Rajya under the rule of Lord Ram. We may say, okay, he's the Supreme Lord, but he was in his Nara Leela, in his human-like pastime. So as the ideal king, who by example followed all the spiritual principles, he demonstrated that if you do that, then all the demigods will be pleased and your country will be prosperous and people will not suffer. Now, we are not seeing that in present society. So if we think about King Anga and he being saintly king compared to Vena, how is it even possible then that his child became so sinful? So in this Bhagavatam, that is not described, but in another scripture called Padma Purana, this incident is described. So Sunita, the wife, in a previous life, her name is not given there if I can recall, but she comes in descendants from Yama. But her nature was that she was antagonistic. She liked to hurt people. And once a Gandharva, a heavenly denizen, one who's extremely beautiful and sings beautifully, these Gandharvas, he was performing meditation, and she saw him in meditation and she was very attracted by him. So she tried to distract him. And he was so in meditation so deeply that he could be steadfast, and he did not respond. So after some of her entreaties, she became frustrated that he's not responding. So she slapped him. She had hit him. But he was very tolerant. He still did not respond. And she tried again, and of course now she's becoming frustrated and anger. And eventually, after a few times where she tried to physically assault him, then the Gandharva broke his meditation, his steadfastness, and he uttered a curse. And that curse, I'll read it. You wicked girl, when you become a householder in your next life, you will get an evil son who will scoff at the Devas and the Brahmanas, and he will be a sinner. So she became this wife, and because of her previous sinful activities, she produced, in fulfillment of that curse, Vena. So we see that there's consequences for so many things. So we in this, sometimes we act and we think that our offenses may be nullified and so on. But we've got to be so careful, especially when you become a devotee and situated as a devotee, then you become more and more accountable for your actions. And therefore, you become, the consequence and the reactions are even also greater. We can understand it like, when you go to the park, you see the keep off the grass sign there. Sometimes you see that, right? They're growing the grass, keep off the grass. The little child runs there. The, what would you call him? The groundsman, or something like that. Park keeper would come and say to the parent, take your child off. There's not much consequences there. But if the adult goes on the grass, he'll get fined. Similarly, when people are not so aware and in ignorance, the consequences are there, but when you are in knowledge, then the consequences are even greater. So somebody thinking, maybe I should stay in ignorance then. I won't have so many consequences. No, we'll remain entangled that way. So we see the power of these sages. In the purport, Prabhupada is then saying, consequently, they have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or reality. So they take that risk. But in Kali Yuga, the saintly persons are not as powerful as they previously were. They were able to burn any sinful man to ashes by the virtue of their spiritual prowess. Simply just by uttering mantras and so on. They could rectify the situation very, very quickly. As you'll see in this pastime also, that when they disposed of King Vena, then they engaged in a certain type of activity where they produced King Prithu, right? So we'll leave that exciting part as watch the space kind of thing. All right. So now saintly persons have no such power due to the influence of age of Kali. We learn from Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures how even for the yajna, just by chanting mantras, they would light it. Right? Now we see them fumble with the lion matches a couple of times. They have to strike it before they even set it on fire. Right? So we don't have that power at all to invoke Agni Dev. Indeed, the Brahmanas do not have the power to perform sacrifices in which animals are put into the fire to attain a new life. So in the Vedic scriptures and in the Vedic practice, there is a section where animal sacrifice is allowed. However, for those who want to eat meat, which is dissuaded in the scriptures because there's so much of consequence from making your meals what I call a culinary brutality, right? So making your meals a violent act by eating meat, there's consequences for that. Collectively eating that meat Hundreds of thousands of animals are killed daily. So what is the consequence? The consequence is war. Therefore there's war, because the collective karma has to go somewhere to be relieved. And it's relieved in violence begets violence. However, getting back to the personal eating of meat, in the scriptures, it's recommended that if somebody really, really wants to eat meat, then they should offer the sacrifice to Kali. And she is the ghastly form of material nature who has the non-enviable task of receiving the offerings from people who want to. And there's recommendations given that it should simply be a goat only you're allowed to eat, nothing else. But for that too, there are no brahmanas qualified to offer those prayers. So therefore the act of bloodletting becomes just a violent act for the satisfaction of some people who think that this is a religious practice. But it's in this age it's not. So the scriptures, they recommend, do not engage in that. But there are other parts also in which sometimes detractors from the Vedic practice will say, yes, but animals were killed. The kings kill the animals. So two main types. There is Ashwamedha and there's Gomedha. Go Brahma, go is cow. Ashwa is referring, that part is referring to the horse sacrifice. So when a king wanted to establish his supremacy, coming to what is going to be called the Rajasuya sacrifice, before that he would have Ashwamedha, and he would send a white stallion with his emblem on the head of the stallion out into the countryside, and that stallion would roam country to country, country to country. And if kings accepted the supremacy of that king who wants to perform the Rajasuya, they would let the horse freely. But if they wanted to object, they would confront that king by stopping the horse. And the king and his ministers would be following the horse, would send message, yes, potential war here now. And then that would take place. But then eventually when the horse returned to the king and is busy performing the Rajasuya, I think we're going a little over time now, right? Let's conclude. Then he would, the saints would perform a sacrifice, a yagya, and they would place that horse into the fire. And by the power of the mantras, they would rejuvenate the body of the horse. And it would be a young horse. The same they would do to test the power of the mantras with the aging cows, Gomedha. Very, very powerful. But in this age, Prabhupada is saying in the purport, indeed the brahmanas do not have the power to perform sacrifices in which animals are put into a fire to attain a new life. Under these circumstances, instead of actively taking part in politics, saintly persons should engage in chanting the Maha Mantra, a point made by Srila Prabhupada when he wrote a letter to Mahatma Gandhi, saying to him that you have been engaging so long in politics. Prabhupada, you go search on the internet, Prabhupada's letter to Mahatma Gandhi, very beautifully written. Prabhupada says to him, I've written so many times to you, but you have not replied. Your secretaries have written to, but you have not replied. But still I am your friend and I'm writing again. And please, now that you have done all of this, you have engaged in this politics, you have established so many things, but on the material platform. Now give up that and concentrate on your spiritual life before it is too late. And we know that became a premonition of Gandhi's assassination. So rather doing that, engage in actively chanting the Maha Mantra. So it's not only for those saintly persons, but we are also aspiring to be saintly. Bhagavad Gita, divine and the demoniac. Those who are practicing the spiritual life are the divine. Those who are not are in the demoniac category, and different degrees of that. So we want to aspire to be that. This movement, Prabhupada did declare, is to create the Brahmins, is to create the Brahmanical class of people. So let us chant Hare Krishna, Krishna, loudly, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada ends the purport. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya. For those of you who are just visiting and do not know, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna in his most magnanimous incarnation. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, simply by chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the general populace, all of us, can derive all benefits. So the saintly persons chant Hare Krishna and they distribute Hare Krishna. So that is the highest welfare. In that way we can see to the welfare of society. Therefore, Harinam, book distribution, Prasadam distribution, and saintly conduct, which also attracts people and impresses upon them that these are the qualities of saintly people. So simply by chanting this Hare Krishna, the general populace can derive all benefits without political implications, which we know Srila Prabhupada was involved in the Gandhi movement as a youth, and when he encountered Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur with his famous argument that we are under the jurisdiction of the British, who will listen to our message? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur chopped him right there, that this Krishna consciousness is more urgent than any political dispensation. And it is. It is the solution to all our problems. We just need to become more convinced. Take it out and please distribute one Bhagavad Gita today. Acha. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Bhagavad Gita as it is ki, Bhagavad Gita Jayanti Mahamahotsav ki, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Pancha kalpadarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya viche patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Gaura bhakta vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. So, I've concluded the class, but it's an important announcement. We think of saintly persons as somebody who has a particular pedigree and must be recognized, maybe with a danda. But the saintly persons walk amongst us. And Rukmini's father, Bhakta Rupa, passed away 1 year. He was convinced by all of this because his life was devotional service. Very much in the background, but you'd see him. All the pots, he would be there festival times, serving the devotees, bringing the van up, offloading, being in the kitchen in the back. Jai Srimati Tulsi Maharani Bhakti. All the pots in the back, driving the van up, loading. And when he started to decline in his health, his focus was so much inward, right? So the saintly persons are the devotees. And of course we have more and more advanced, but we can see it through Srila Prabhupada's mercy, how we can practice. So today is Tirubhav, and Maithili Mataji and Rukmini have sponsored the breakfast. And by their mercy, we are invited, all of us, for breakfast there. And those of you who have come as guests by the invitation, thank you very much for coming. And I think we can go down for prasad. Bhakta Rupa Prabhu ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrind ki Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you.